Welcome back, guys. We have reorganized our table here. Obviously, for the next time you come out, JJ, we need to get a much larger working area for you.
Yeah, that would be cool. But you know what? I like the tight feel.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so the first thing we're going to look at is a very gold color themed Z87 mainstream lineup.
Yes.
We're going to look at, so what do you want to start with? What are we going to talk about first
I think let's start off with the strongest in terms of the value, in terms of the price band.
Okay.
So we can start off with our Dash A.
What's this one here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Dash A is going to be a SKU that's really going to be represented, like I said, for the guys, guys out there that are interested in building a system, but they're looking for pretty much probably the most aggressive price point. And this is something we just want to allow users. Hey, we have a type of solution for you if you're really looking for an aggressively targeted board, but you don't want to compromise in terms of the quality of the board, or even in the support. If you consider the board's still going to have a 3-year warranty, right? We're still going to have outstanding UEFI updates applied through the long term to give you compatibility, stability, optimal reliability for the product. That's still going to get that, but you're still going to get a lot of great features. When we take a look here, a little bit of our feature breakdown, you're still going to have the advanced digital design incorporation of working with our UEFI and that IVR for all the overclocking capabilities. Like I said, 4.8 is definitely doable here. 2400 4DIMM is entirely doable here, no issues in that regard. You're still going to get that USB 3 boost technology that we talked about. The fan expert, all the fan headers on here, they're all 4-pin. Right, there is no 3-pin fan headers. Every single one of them is 4-pin. They all support 3-pin operation. You get that advanced level of control interface. Even the audio codec, right? We've incorporated on here. It's the improved DTS Ultra 2 PC, so you get full DTS Connect support in terms of being able to re-encode, stereo channel to multi-channel if you have a digital set of speakers or you're outputting to a receiver. One feature that I know you really liked when we showed you this at the technical workshop that we invited you guys out towards was the direct key feature, right? Where if you're setting up your system, maybe you want to be able to reboot straight into the UEFI, right? You just press that button on the motherboard and it'll reboot directly. But even for users, what happens if I'm using my system, right, and I already have it installed, right? I don't have access to that button anymore.
Correct.
Well, we've got this awesome little header that's built onto the motherboard called the DRCT header. The DRCT header will allow you to take the reset cable from the front of your chassis and you can run it straight to that. And when you do that, once you go ahead and do that, your reset button will become a direct UEFI button. So essentially you can press that and it will reboot you directly into the UEFI.
I remember we talked about that. It's down here with the front panel connection.
Yeah,
it's hard to see. It's just a 2-pin header.
It's a little just 2-pin header, but
we talked about who really uses their reset button on the motherboard.
Not too many people.
You only do it when something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So I think replacing that with something
more useful.
That's useful is actually a great idea. And then I remember when you told me about the direct key, I was like, well, it's not really helpful for me if I'm not on an open chassis. Right. So I think that's a good mix.
And even in that same way too, if you didn't, and maybe some chassis, if you notice, have started to phase actually out the reset button. We still
really?
even have an application within Windows that's called boot setting that'll still allow you to do the same thing. So wherever you'd like in terms of using the system, you'll have access to that feature. You've got our MemoK technology, which is a hardware button that allows you to quickly initialize and resolve memory-based problems. It also can even work like a semi-clear CMOS, which is cool because if, let's say, you're maybe tweaking or tuning, overclocking the board, right? If you have to reset the CMOS, the bad thing about that is that it's going to clear at every setting, right? So like if I have a RAID configuration or my fan control set or I have other profile parameters in my UEFI, all that gets reset back to 0.
Gotcha.
But the MemoK button, if you depress it, it'll actually just reset frequency-based parameters, but it would keep the rest of your actual UEFI settings intact. So you could
That's kind of nice.
So you could use it in kind of different respects. You just use it for either overclocking recovery, or you could use it to actually specifically resolve memory initialization issues. We still continue to have our TPU and our EPU technologies on board. So you've got 2 switches on the motherboard.
Right.
One can give you as much as a 4.25 gigahertz overclock in the flip of a switch. So if you've got some basic little improved upon cooling from the Intel reference solution, just flip it on. That's it. Hardware-based overclock. You don't need to worry about tweaking, tuning, setting up anything. On the EPU side, maybe you're not interested in overclocking. You want to run stock, but maybe you would like to have a little bit less power consumption, a little bit better thermal performance. That's built on board, and even things like our QLED. You have a full 4 LED diagnostic system for the CPU, for the DRAM, for the graphics, for the boot device. They'll light up and they'll let you know, hey, if the motherboard is having a problem posting, you get a little LED that will light next to each one of those items and let you know, hey, there's an issue.
So what about, there's a couple of things that stand out to me on the design.
Yeah.
Two legacy PCI slots.
Yes.
Right. Now, PCI is not part of the Z87 chipset anymore.
That is correct. Yeah, we actually have to add in a controller for that, and that's because generally at this price band, we tend to find that people that tend to be a little bit more price aggressive in their board adoption, right? They tend to hold on to maybe some of those items that are maybe older in legacy, right? You know, so maybe you've got an older, you know, PCIe sound card. Maybe you have like an older capture card. Could be like a TV tuner. Different things like that. So as such, we're enabling a little bit older legacy support in terms of the board wall. As you move up in the price band, generally, you're somebody that, of course, is adopting newer technology. So as such, you're generally going to get less of that legacy-based connectivity on the motherboard.
What's with the SATA port design here?
That's ultimately just part of us trying to maximize the BOM layout cost consideration. It's actually more expensive to create fully right-angled stacked base serial ATA connections.
Okay.
But instead of giving you like that vertical bracketed out base design, as opposed to having the right angle, we can do this and still hit a little bit more aggressive price point, but still give you right angle connectivity, but it's going to look a little bit different than before, you know. But it's still, if you take a look at that base board, you haven't really lost almost, you know, really any key thing. You still got a great board in terms of tweaking, tuning, a lot of performance-oriented features, very robust. I mean, the fan control in itself, like I said, if you even went out and bought a fan controller, you wouldn't get the same level of functionality from a $40 fan bay controller. In terms of being able to give you that level of automatic fan calibration, tuning, being able to rename the headers, having 3-pin and 4-pin support. So that in itself is a pretty big value add, and that doesn't count, of course, all the other little quality components from those 5X protection or even the UEFI options. Now, we haven't talked about all the new UEFI options that we have built in.
We'll get to
we're gonna cover that later. But when you consider this board is going to have stuff that's really cool, and you've seen already a lot of these UEFI options. I think
you guys will want to stick around and pay attention to the.
There's some pretty awesome stuff.
UEFI,
so that's all built in.
stuff.
You know.
Now I should point out this port on the back. This is not Thunderbolt. This is just mini display port.
That's correct. It's mini DP because, of course, with this generation, you have
mini
the ability
port,
to drive more digital. Yep.
On this board. Okay.
So it's same thing, you know, there's that use of sometimes going to older installations. You know, the Dash A, what used to be our LE-based SKU, it finds a lot of homes in a lot of different places, whether they're like small businesses, Soho offices, you know, or just people that are setting up, you know, more budgetly aggressive board. But that's why we keep, like I said, a little bit more legacy on there.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's up next?
If we move up to the next SKU, we've got the Plus, and you'll notice already, for you guys that have kind of been catching something, we've changed the naming convention, right? We didn't talk about that, but there's no more P8 in front of our boards.
That's good.
We've tried to simplify the process, so the new naming convention is one designed to be clear. You're going to see Z87 to just represent the chipset, and then from there, the designation for the board. So A is what we were saying, hey, it's an ASUS kind of class product, right? The Plus is going to be the next board in, and it's Plus. It tends to be better than what the industry average offers. We've got more functionality, more connectivity, you know, really well-built board. And the rest of the naming conventions kind of go into that. It evolves as you it evolves as you become more advanced in kind of being a PC DIY type of person. You would go from maybe the Plus to a Pro because you become a professional. From being a professional, you can become an expert, and then Deluxe is kind of like Deluxe, right? It's got everything, right? So that's kind of the way the naming convention works. But with Plus, we keep every single thing that we had on the Dash A, but we add, of course, the Intel NIC, and that gives us, of course, some additional enhancements and performance that we have. You also go ahead and you get a little bit more connectivity in terms of the total amount of headers that are on the motherboard, in terms of the fan headers. This one also incorporates our 4-way optimization technology, which we're going to be doing a demonstration on, but you saw this at the technical workshop. The cool thing about 4-way is that pretty much we handle all the key things you would do when you're setting up your system in one click. So we overclock your system, we automatically tune all your fan profiles, we make optimizations to your power management settings, and we auto-configure all the VRM power management settings. So all, as opposed to having to run different applications for different purposes, you can do that all in one single click. So that's integrated from this board up to every single other board that we'll discuss has this 4-way optimization technology.
Okay.
So that of course you get a little bit more serial ATA. This as opposed to the 6 by default, you get 8 on this board. So 2 supplemental
power button down here.
Yeah.
That you didn't have on the last one.
And the inductors are a little bit higher in performance. Like I said, you know,
It's a wider board as well.
Yes, it's slightly wider. It's still within the standard ATX specification. Sure. But the previous board was still using what are referred to as fully molded inductors. So that means that the inside of the choke is not hollow. Mm-hmm. These ones are still fully molded, like all the rest of the boards you're going to look at, but they're alloy based. So they have a little bit higher amperage output, a little bit better efficiency. So it just means you're getting a little bit better power output capability from the board.
A couple extra USB 3.0 ports as well.
So overall, you pretty much have just bumped up all the kind of key spec on the board, right? You went and you put on more I/O,
right.
You added another fan header, you improved the NIC, so you got the four-way optimization technology.
Okay.
Yeah. So next one up is we got the Pro. So the Pro is actually a pretty big upgrade in a lot of ways. You really start to get a lot of the key hallmarks that we are really pushing for this Z87 generation. So you, for one, integrate default our brand new Wi-Fi Go implementation. So if you remember the previous generation, we had Wi-Fi in a huge amount of SKUs.
Right.
This generation definitely doesn't change, and we've stepped up it. Previous Pro generation was only single band, 2.4 gigahertz. This one becomes dual band. So this is 2.4 and 5 gig. 2x2 base solution with Bluetooth 4.0 on the board. Plus it comes with our full what are called Wi-Fi Go services. So you have things like DLNA media streaming built in. We have even cloud level services built in for syncing and managing. So if you have like a Dropbox account, or we have Google Drive, or like even our ASUS web storage, you can manage that, and you can sync between all your accounts even within our AI Suite program. So it's a cool way to consolidate and integrate all that stuff inside there. For some users that are really actually savvy, we have a built-in ability to even take that wireless controller and serve it in a access point or repeater mode. So if you want to turn your desktop into helping an area to extend your wireless connectivity as opposed to having it just be a wireless receiver, you could also do that.
So you plug an Ethernet into the motherboard.
Sure.
And then now you're basically, even though you've got hardwired Ethernet to your desktop, it may be in the basement or something like that.
Yeah.
Now you can extend Wi-Fi down.
And you can create a little Wi-Fi environment, or
that's
maybe if you're getting wireless signal, but you then want to help to extend a little bit further from where you are, you can do that also.
All right.
So in terms of the rest of the connection options, we keep things pretty similar, right? You step up once again to having a more complete set of USB, right? Where in total you have 8 USB 3 ports on the board. So there's 6 on the back plane, and then there's the additional front header. You go to, of course, more internal headers, and this is a full PCIe baseboard, right? So it's a by 1 by 16 by 1 by 1 by 16 by 1, and I think lastly another by 16. But that's of course going to vary in terms of the bandwidth that's applied, either a by 2 or by 4, depending on the lane allocation on the number of controllers that you're utilizing. But the rest is going to be very consistent in terms of what we talked about: Intel NIC, alloy-based inductors, the 5K rated caps, and all those enhanced technologies that we talked about, whether it was the 4-way, the USB 3 boost, USB charger, all that stuff, the network eye control, it's all there.
We've replaced the PCI slots with additional PCI Express slots.
So this one's a really kind of stalwart. The Pro's always been kind of a hallmark of really giving you almost every single key thing that we bring to the table in our mainstream series, minus just maybe a couple of the more advanced specialized features that you're going to have on something, let's say like the like the Deluxe series motherboard. So we also have for this generation made a change to the Wi-Fi Go module. If you look at the backplane for it, you'll see that it has SMA-based antennas. The previous generation, we actually had what are called pin-based antennas. The pin-based antennas weren't bad, but the cool thing about SMA-based antennas is it's a standard. So you can go ahead and you can go purchase any type of wireless antennas that you'd like. So if you want to be able to maybe improve the overall, the range or the throughput by having higher amplification-based antennas, you can purchase whichever ones you want, as opposed to the ones that come already included with the unit. Gotcha. And we didn't touch on this on the Plus board or on this board yet, but this, along with every single other of the boards that we're talking about, come with that USB BIOS flashback technology that we've had for now multiple generations, where you have that ability to go ahead and flash or update or recover the UEFI, no CPU, no memory, no graphics card. Even if the motherboard doesn't turn on, you can update it to recover the board.
Okay.
So let's see. Next up, we've got I think the Expert.
Okay.
So the Expert is a new SKU. We actually didn't have this last year, and if you remember before this round, you might remember we used to have the Evo board.
Yes.
So this is pretty much kind of the reintroduction of the Evo, but with a new name. So this sits between the Pro and the Deluxe now. And the Expert, really the biggest addition that you're going to find on it is that this one features Thunderbolt.
Aha. Okay.
Yeah, so outside of that, of course, it maintains pretty much everything else that we've talked about, dual band Wi-Fi, the Fan Expert 2, USB 3 boost, the digital controls, all the new UEFI options that we're going to cover in the UEFI video, the 4-way, everything is there. You know, I mean,
which Thunderbolt controller is it using?
this is the current updated newest Thunderbolt controller, but it's not the 2-port controller. There are two variants, of course, a single port and a dual port controller. And we'll talk about, actually, we do have a board that does even feature 2 Thunderbolt ports on it with the Deluxe Dual.
Okay.
Yeah. Next one is, I think we got here, the Deluxe. So the Deluxe is kind of like a ASUS like stalwart, right? It really represents kind of the, I think overall really kind of a class-leading product. We try to put as much as we really can on the Deluxe, right? I mean, it's going to be a great board in terms of if you're looking for the most robust connectivity and flexibility, the Deluxe is really going to have to offer it. So one really cool thing for this generation, for Wi-Fi, we even go up to another notch. This one doesn't have it on the I/O because we've taken it off to show that that's our new connection in terms of it's a PCI Express-based connection, which is pretty awesome because it even gives you better performance than, let's say, a USB-based item. But we have 802.11ac versus 802.11n.
Right. So if you had a USB-based one, USB 2.0, you wouldn't even be able to get
the same
maximum
performance.
AC speeds.
That's correct.
Right.
You would actually be saturating the bus. It wouldn't be able to provide the highest level of throughput. You also, of course, still get the Wi-Fi support with this model. One of the other key differentials is if maybe, Ryan, you can show in between, right above the second PCI Express by 16 slot,
right,
you're going to see that there's a PLX chip. So one of the things a lot of people don't realize on the Deluxe versus the other boards is that PLX, it's not a Gen 3 multiplexing solution, so it's not designed to enable 3-way or 4-way support, but it's designed to be able to allow us to have more concurrent PCIe lanes to the large number of supplemental controllers that we have on there. And what I mean by supplemental controllers is you have more USB 3 ports or you have additional SATA 6G ports, right? This board has a total of 10 SATA 6G ports. So you've still only got 16 lanes under this chipset. So how can you make that all work at one time if you're really going to be a user that's running multiple GPUs, you're using your front and back USB 3, maybe you're using the 2 NICs that are also on this board because this board features 2 NICs versus single NICs that we were looking at other boards.
Right.
So the Deluxe really goes up a lot, right? I mean, we added more USB 3, 2 NICs, the PLX, the 802.11ac support, the 10 SATA 6G. You know, it's a beefy board. It's got a lot going on there, and so you're talking about pretty much getting a little bit of everything that you would want already integrated onto the motherboard.
Is this Thunderbolt or is this DisplayPort?
This one is actually going to be mini DP.
Mini DP.
The Deluxe Dual, which will be the variant of the Deluxe that will also have that one, is going to be the one that's going to be featuring that. So the Deluxe, pretty much like you see, it gives you everything, but that's definitely an important note is that PLX differential, and that's predominantly there because, of course, as you probably go up in the price band, you're probably a user that uses more and more aspects of the motherboard, right? Sure. If you're a Dash A user, right, I mean, we know from market data that 90% of the market plus uses only one GPU. But a Deluxe user is probably in that higher percentage of saying, hey, I probably run 2 GPUs. So as such, I'm also probably running more storage devices.
Gotcha.
I have more USB 3. I'm going to need something to be able to sustain all those active connections. So that's going to be kind of a differentiator between, let's say, this and the Pro board, even though this has a lot of other specs improved upon as comparison to just the Pro board.
There was a question in the chat room, actually, about is there any issue with the Wi-Fi being so close to USB 3.0?
No, no, there's no. I mean, the antenna doesn't impact that at all. I mean, I've used very large flash drives. So, you know, I mean, if you take a look at some of the really big ones, like the Kingston HyperX dual channel enabled one, which is the larger, fatter flash drive, it fits. I haven't had any issues whatsoever. And the antennas, well, we didn't take any out. They're long, so they have quite a bit of distance to them. They still have that magnetic base, so there's no really impacting that. And that actually makes another very good point, is that our solution, if you notice, the Wi-Fi modules that we have, we integrate directly into the backplane. It's more expensive and complicated to do it the way that we do, but we don't use an add-in card, which would, one, on paper, wouldn't show you that you would lose some of the spec. Because technically, if let's say you have a multi-PCI slot-based board, right, if you're having an add-in card and it tells you you have a certain amount of slots, you've lost that slot because you're putting in a card, right?
Sure.
The other thing too is that some of the vendors that may be integrating PCI directly like into a slot spaced within the PCI, you have to remember that heat is not a friend for wireless. So if you've got, like, let's say a high performance GPU, the internal ambient temperature within this PCB board area goes up on average by about maybe 20 C in terms of its ambient temperature. And that can sometimes significantly affect the wireless. So we've isolated and separated into a dedicated section, which is probably going to have the least amount of heat buildup in that area.
All right.
So it's a small thing, but it shows you kind of total design thinking in terms of how we work with the board.
Okay.
And then next up, we've got the Deluxe Dual there. So the Deluxe Dual has everything that we've already talked about from top to bottom, doesn't lose one of the specs. The main thing is that this one incorporates 2 Thunderbolt ports built onto the board. And of course, those also can serve as display outputs because that's inherently supported within the Thunderbolt specification. The additional benefit that this model also has is that it comes included with the little NFC breakout box. So we haven't talked about this yet, but a brand new feature that we have for the Z87 platform is that we're going to be the first vendor, just like the 811AC and a lot of the other specs that we've talked about, is being first to market to support NFC as part of our motherboard-based product line. So there'll be this board will have this built in with it in terms of being inside the box, but you will be able to purchase this little NFC breakout box and use it with any single one of the boards that we talked about. So that Dash A, even that entry-level SKU, the Plus or the Pro, it wouldn't matter. You could buy this the NFC accessory, and if you have an NFC-enabled smartphone or tablet, then you could go ahead and have NFC action items, such as one passed hand over the NFC box to be able to log into your system, or a quick action to be able to, let's say, maybe you just came back from like a party, right? I know your father just had a birthday, right? You know, you probably took a lot of pictures. Maybe you get home and you've got your smartphone, you want to pass it over. Immediately, the last camera roll that you have or the last set of videos would automatically auto-transfer to your system. So you can launch a lot of cool functions. We have that built into an application that you just load up onto your iOS or your Android-based device, and you would be able to execute a number of different advanced functions via the NFC. So that's a pretty cool feature that we've incorporated, and for you guys that may not have NFC support in your phone, we do have a fob that comes included that will at least allow you to go ahead and store some basic data such as the logon support functionality.
And it's worth noting that this actually has, it has a USB 3 connection out. So, sorry, has a USB 3 connection out there, but it incorporates 2 inputs. So
yes, so you can go ahead and keep that on your desk so you have a hub-based solution there, but you still essentially, we take one port away from you, but we give it back to you and we add some flexibility of having it there, right?
Yep, very cool.
So that's a really cool option. And lastly, you know, we tend to not always talk about some of the other solutions in terms of the form factor, but of course, you know, we make more boards than anybody else, a lot of different motherboards, and we still also have micro ATX-based SKUs. Now, we're going to be talking more definitely about the performance-oriented SKUs when we get to like ROG and the Tough series with the Griffin and with the Gene models, but we also have a Z87 ATX-based SKU, which is still very feature-rich. You know, it's got a solid design on there. You still get molded inductors, you got the Fan Expert 2 technology, so this is still going to make a great board, you know, if you want to have a small form factor, you know, gaming box, you know, maybe a media center that you want to be able to have some performance behind it, you know, you have some flexibility with it, so this is going to still be another really nice option for users out there.
Very cool.
So I think that gives some perspective on the mainstream series, you know, which is pretty dense. I mean, we've probably got a board at, you know, pretty much any one of the price bands that you want to be able to get at, but while still keeping a really great sense of consistency in the feature set across every single one of the boards. And really where the design differential, like I said, came into play is more so what's the type of user you are, right? Do you need somebody like I'm on the Deluxe and I need 10 SATA ports, or am I somebody that only needs 8, right? Am I okay having, you know, 6 USB 3, or do I need 10 USB 3? Do I need dual NICs? You know, do I need 811AC, or am I okay with either no wireless or having, you know, dual band wireless? But, you know, you pretty much get every single key specification you would want. The cool part about this, though, is that, you know, as we get into the segmentational models, we're going to get into some really advanced specialized features and functions.
Speaking of which, I see a lot of people in the chat room right now asking about, oh no, I want to see the mini ITX boards. Where's the mini ITX? We have a lot more boards to go through here. We're going to do another quick mute our microphone session, put up a bunch of more motherboards here, and we'll be right back to talk about more of the new Z87 products from ASUS.